So today will be the first class of this series called Buddhist Practice and Buddhist History. I decided to join these two elements. Usually we teach these two things in two different courses, but I thought that because this will be a quick, refreshing a course that we will touch basic things in Buddhism, and so we will start. So I thought maybe the first three classes we will go to more doctrinal aspects of Buddhism, and then last three classes we will move to the history. So today will be the first class on Buddhist doctrine section. So we have three classes on Buddhist doctrine. So I decided to choose the Noble Eightfold Path. So that is the main Buddhist practice that we are doing. So I'm going to share my screen with you, because I have a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to use for this class. So let me first open. So Noble Eightfold Path, and this is the core of the Buddhist practice. So of course, Buddhist practice involves so many other supplementary practices, but this is the core Buddhist practice. What we call Noble Eightfold Path is the main strategy, or maybe technique and methods taught by the Buddha to overcome our suffering and then have complete peace. So the Noble Eightfold Path is the fourth truth among the four truths that Buddha has taught. So that is the context. So what you call the Four Noble Truths is one of the main teachings of the Buddha. So in the Four Noble Truths, there are four truths that Buddha discovered and then shared with the world. So among these four truths, the last truth is what we call Noble Eightfold Path. So let's understand the context. So these four truths that Buddha discovered is related to the term called dukkha. Dukkha is a very important term that refers to a particular state of our mind. In fact, the state of our mind that is most of the time, that is underlying most of our experiences are characterized by this quality called dukkha, by this nature called dukkha. And usually, the very rough translation of dukkha is suffering. But, I think if you have done enough Buddhist readings, now that it's not simply suffering, but more, it has a more sense of dissatisfaction. That, most of our experiences have that element of not completely okay, that kind of dissatisfaction. So the four truths that Buddha has discovered, the first one is called this reality of this dukkha, this state of dissatisfaction as a universal, as a common experience that all living beings are going through. So we can roughly translate it as life is generally characterized by dissatisfaction. That will be the first truth. We call the truth of dukkha, a truth of suffering. That's what you will see in many readings, the truth of suffering. It simply means life is generally characterized by dissatisfaction. So if you find this characteristic in your own experience, don't be surprised, because that is a universal thing. And this is what Buddha discovered. That's very common, that all living beings have this characteristic in their experience. And the second truth is called that dissatisfaction, that dukkha, is a causal product. So it has its primary cause is craving. So it's more like there's an inner cause to that, psychological root for this experience. But we will come to that later in detail. It's not only psychological part is one important element of it. So that is caused by craving. And the third one third truth we discovered is this dissatisfaction can completely be overcome. That's the good news. So first two truths related to our current state of life, and it is generally characterized by dissatisfaction. It has a cause. And the second two truths are about the way we can overcome it. First, it is possible that this dukkha can be completely overcome, and there's a path for that complete absence of dissatisfaction. So that path is what we are going to discuss. So it's like we are discussing the fourth one without talking about the first three. But we will later know that actually we will discuss these four things very in detail, because the first item of this path is knowing these four truths mainly. So we will come to that later. So people always think about when we talk about dukkha, when we talk about suffering, and people sometimes have misconception that Buddhism is so much talking so much about suffering. And in fact, yes, it's Buddhist teachings are quite serious, quite concerned about this human predicament. And the Buddha, that is the main focus of the Buddha. In fact, Buddha said that in all of my teachings that Buddha taught for 45 years, after becoming the Buddha. And one point he said that in all my teaching career, I have taught two things. No matter how many sermons, how many discussions, how many dialogues I had taught two things. One, how dukkha arises, and the second one, how dukkha can be overcome. So in simple terms, how suffering arises and how suffering can be overcome. But very reason that the Buddha was serious or concerned about dukkha or suffering is to not really encourage people to suffer, but actually to overcome it. The more you know it, more you understand it, and then you can overcome it. So even the vulnerable truths, the way it present usually is related to is around the term dukkha, and the truth of suffering, cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and path leading to the cessation of suffering. So you hear the suffering 4 times. So I thought it will be important, particularly for people who are learning Buddhism as new comers, to have this alternative formulation of that. What we call this is actually complete absence of complete happiness. Absence of complete happiness. That's what we call dukkha, that common state, what we call dissatisfaction. So if you put like that, the first truth, absence of complete happiness. This is common for vast majority of living beings. Absence of complete happiness. We may have happy moments, we may have like pleasurable experiences and moments, but underlying state is like absence of complete happiness. So and then the cause for that absence, that will be the second truth. And then the third one with the possibility of complete happiness. The reality is the absence of complete happiness, and there's a cause for that, and then possibility of complete happiness will be the third one, and the fourth one will be then path to complete happiness, and that is the part that we are going to discuss today. What do you think? When you have these formulations, what do you think? What do you think about this formulation? Any suggestion? Anything that you like to? So instead of having a dissatisfaction or suffering, we can have this alternative formulation, absence of complete happiness.
I think it's good. I like the alternative formulations because I think the absence of complete happiness more people may relate to that.
Okay, thank you. So this is this is get an idea. So this is what the common. This is common to all of our experiences. Then, so but there's a way out of this whole situation also, and then there's a path. So today our topic is to discuss that path. Okay, thank you. Is that Chris who spoke right now? Okay, never mind. We'll come to that later. Okay, the other one, so we will talk about the last truth in the Four Noble Truths today, the path to complete happiness, or let's say path to complete peace, because the kind of happiness that we are talking about is not an elated form of happiness, it's more like a deep peace. So path to complete peace, or path to complete happiness. So the other one I would like to pay some attention is this idea of path. So whenever we talk about the path, and it helps us to understand that this is a journey that we have to make, and this is also a training, and this is also a way like a way of life. So in order to have that have a complete solution for the general human predicament, and there is a practice that we need to follow, a path, a way of life, and a journey, because there's an important element in this idea called path, because this is not something that we will be able to get through simply waiting and wishing for happiness. Many people will wish for happiness, and they will, we will wish our suffering to go away, and of course, that's common. But I think this, with the term of this path, it kind of helps us to understand that simply wishing something is not going to happen, and there's always some practice involved. If we need a change, we need to change what we do. Not only actually what we do, we'll come to later what we think and what we feel also. But this element of engagement, this path, the involvement, this practice way is very important. And I think we need to understand the significance of the term path here. Yeah, okay, let me see. Okay. Okay. The other one I would like to emphasize here is that when we have these moments of dukkha in our life, and let's right now think about moments of suffering. Can be our pains, our dissatisfaction, and usually we try to avoid them. And of course the whole purpose of Buddhist practice is to overcome them. But the very interesting thing here is actually how we overcome our suffering is not by really avoiding suffering. Try to like distract ourselves from the moments of suffering and try to kind of blind ourselves and run away from it, or and it's ignoring it. That's not the way actually to overcome this. So we really need to address it. But at the same time, it is the moments of suffering, and it is the really moments of pain and disappointments that can actually pave us the way to go beyond. So the suffering, moments of sufferings actually are not necessarily bad actually, because Buddha said that it is in the moments of suffering that we become serious about this issue, and we will seriously address that. And otherwise, we will always, try to find some distraction that we can, not address the actual, issues in the life. So if you had some really difficult moments in your life, and think about that, those are the ingredients for your spiritual growth. But of course, not simply having more suffering doesn't necessarily mean that you have more wisdom, more progress. But how we mindfully encounter suffering is the key here. And even if you have some if only a few incidents in your life that you encounter suffering seriously, but if we mindfully encounter them, and that can open the door for us for a deeper understanding. So the interesting simile is the simile of the lotus. um, I mean, of course, lotus has been a very important symbol in Buddhism, but and one important lesson that we learn from lotus is that actually is possibility of transcending, because the lotus can come above the water and the mud and shine, but at the same time, lotus is rooted in the mud. So it is the very mud, it is the very muddy water that actually feed this lotus. So it is the moments of suffering that can open the door for us to have a serious thinking about it, and then find ways to evolve ourselves beyond that possibility. So just like the mud and the let's say muddy water are the very nutritions, or maybe the food for the lotus, our moments of suffering are the food for our spiritual progress if we treat them mindfully. And there's an interesting statement by a famous Buddhist monk, Vietnamese monk called Thich Nhat Hanh. He said, "Without mud, there can be no lotus." That means without moments of suffering in our life, there will be no opportunity for enlightenment, because and there's no opportunity for spiritual growth, because we need those moments to examine. And at the same time, we have to remember that just because we have too much mud doesn't mean that there'll be lotus all the time. So the whole mechanism that we need to learn how we can transform our mud and use them as fertilizers to shine our life and evolve ourselves, and then be compassionate to ourselves and so many other beings. So the Noble Eightfold Path is just that mechanism that we can use. This path is also called the middle path, and that because the reason that we call it middle path is that usually whenever people engage in a spiritual practice or religious practice, either people try to and not only spiritual practice, but usually when people need more happiness and peace, and they usually follow two extremes. Either they will think that sensual indulgence is the only way to get happiness or peace. So we have a blind sensual indulgence, and most of the materialistic societies will go towards that direction, and that's one extreme that human beings are seeking happiness. The other extreme, once they realize that that's not really give them happiness, and they will go to the other extreme, which is the strict forms of asceticism, like depriving oneself from all, even from basic needs, and like engaging in all kind of self-torturing practices as a way of finding some spiritual meaning. In Buddhist teaching is also another form of asceticism. The Buddha, before becoming the Buddha, the ascetic Siddhartha engaged in all forms of asceticism. What we call the Noble Eightfold Path is called the middle path because it avoids both extremes. Sometimes when we have the middle path, people have some misconception thinking that it is more like a compromise between the sensual indulgence and asceticism, like little bit of indulgence, little bit of asceticism, and then you combine it and you got the middle path. That is wrong. That is wrong. What we mean by middle path is not really compromise of the two extremes, actually avoiding the errors of both extremes. And then the middle path, the reason we call it middle path is that body is not abandoned in this whole process. But of course, we are not going to attach too much to the body and rely on the body for our happiness either. So you take care of the body really well, and then use that health of the body to develop mind, mental qualities, and then mental skills. So the taking care of the body, and then also training the mind. So because it avoids the extreme approaches that usually human beings are following in order to achieve happiness. Because of that avoidance, we call it middle path. Okay, so the whole Noble Eightfold Path is this. So we will deal with each item in the following weeks. But today we will deal with the first one. But I just want you to have a look at that, and that what you call the middle path, and also Eightfold Path, which is the last truth of the Four Noble Truths. It's called right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And so we will deal with them. You can see, just having a simple look at this, you can see there are items that are related to behavior, and then there are items that are related to more of intellectual, maybe conceptual orientation, and there are also items that are related to more deeper meditation. So it kind of covers basic aspects of our life. And you will see this wheel, Dhamma wheel, and you may have seen eight spokes in this Dhamma wheel, and mostly these 8 spokes are representing these 8 items of the Noble Eightfold Path. This wheel may be the wheel that you are most familiar with, but actually there's a spoke that is coming out of the outer ring. Like later additions, the original Dhamma wheel did not have these outer spokes. We will learn about why. I don't know when it actually we have this kind of image, but it's a wheel that wheel should be able to rotate, and that's the whole meaning of Noble Eightfold Path. Is something that all elements will help each other. There's a rotation going on there. We will come to that later. Okay. Right now I'm going to stop sharing for a while. Okay. Okay, so we can. So far, I just give you the background. In general, where the Noble Eightfold Path is situated. In the Buddhist teaching and basic characteristic of it. So, if you have any questions, anything that you would like to know more about, the things that I have discussed so far, this is the time to ask. I can. I have one question here called, can you explain more about how to mindfully encounter suffering? Yes, I think that's an important point here, how to mindfully encounter suffering, because whenever we are going through some difficult moments, it could be physical pain, it could be emotional pain. Let's say, somebody has just, left us, we have this, feeling of loss, feeling of being, abandoned, whatever, whatever emotional pain or mental pain, physical pain, sorry. So whenever we have this suffering, what we usually do, maybe I should ask from you, right? So one thing we do actually, we try, sometimes we try to react to that situation violently, because we really don't like to have that kind of, pain, emotional or physical. So we'll do some aggressive behavior. We will try to, do something and then say certain things to kind of express our pain in our words, in our actions. Or the other thing we will do, actually, we will try to avoid it. We will try to distract ourselves from that. So that is why people use, sometimes drugs and maybe other forms of, entertainment, So maybe either eating so much, so to speak, kind of way of distracting ourselves. So when we have moments of pain or suffering, we will either try to avoid it or distract ourselves from that and not really seeing it, or we will try to aggressively interact with that. So what we call mindfully encountering suffering is actually almost like a middle way, that we are not going to avoid it, we are not going to run away from it, we are also not going to react to it quickly. And so we explore that whole experience, because we have been running away from our suffering, so to speak, like try to like numb ourselves and find many things. We don't know how really this suffering feels like. It's not really suffer, but actually you are experiencing it. You're experiencing that pain, how exactly you feel that pain in your both body and mind. And then first we have that whole exploration of that whole sensation that happening. It could be a physical sensation, it could be a mental sensation. It's almost like you're stepping out of your own experience and watching it. This is a very interesting practice of mindfulness. It's like we are sitting on the bank of the river. There's a whole river of emotion is going through in our mind, or maybe a whole river of painful sensation happening in the body. And usually we are in the river, like and being there, but we can actually step out and sit on the bank, and we don't going to disturb the flow of the sensation, flow of the feeling, but we are going to watch it. So in our mind we have these feelings and sensations, and also we also have this awareness. So we have this both possibility. So we are stepping into the awareness side, and then watch what is happening right here. You still have the pain, you will still have the painful emotions or painful sensation, but the moment you start observe it, and there's a different quality to that experience. And once you start observe it, and then we can slowly examine what are the causes and conditions that brought this whole phenomena, and we can and then of course, if we have learned some teachings of the Buddha about the dukkha, and then we can use that knowledge to understand what is happening here. And we'll come to that. We need to know mechanism of suffering, and we can see, okay, this is the experience I'm going through, and we can use the understanding of the teachings of the Buddha to understand, to make sense what is happening here, and then we can understand certain elements, certain factors, certain conditions that we have some control, and when we remove that, the whole experience will be gone. And that's the method. Okay, I have a few more questions here. Let's see. Your alternative explanation of Four Noble Truths, instead of complete happiness, should it be continuous happiness? Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. But I think maybe in that case we will. If you mean the happiness in the sense of peace, that will be more useful here, because when we have the continuous happiness, we think that there will be no moments of fluctuation at all. But as long as we carry this body, as long as we live in this world, although let's say you fully found a way to overcome your suffering, and you will still have bumps, ups and downs in a way, but of course underlying all these different changes of the experience, we have deeper sense of peace. That's what we can call it. Yes, definitely it's possible that we can have continuous happiness too. In meditation, allowing feelings and thoughts to arise, recognize and sit with them. Oh, it's not a question. Okay, there's another question. Why Buddha and his disciples always use lotus as an example in their discourse? Is there any significance of lotus in Buddhism? Okay, I think this is a good question that we all can spend some. I can ask from the audience. Okay, I hope that there are people who have some familiarity in the Buddhist literature. Can anybody help me to answer this question? Why the Buddha and his disciples always use the lotus as an example? And is anybody like to help me in this case? Any suggestion? What is your understanding?
Bante, I think
Is it Vinity?
No,
Yes.
this is Nirmala. This is mom.
Okay, okay, okay. Go ahead. Yes, Nirmala.
I think it is because culturally lotus is an important part of the model India at the time of Buddha was doing his teachings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay, that's a good cultural explanation. Because lotus was available, so people are familiar with the lotus and how actually lotus arises, its background, everything. So it's something that people can relate to, right? Okay. Okay, thank you, Nirmala. And anyone else would like to tell what it symbolizes?
Swami Nuhansa, can I add to that?
Yes, yes, Sachini, yes.
So I think, yes, it was much commonly found example, but also I think the enlightenment Lord Buddha attained. So he was also born into a human family and had a childhood and aroused from it, and then attained the next level. So it is like it gives a nice comparison how the lotus starts from the mud but then comes out, and without touching the muddy water, it rises above the water. So I think it shows that it was from the suffering, and understanding it only can we can reach the enlightenment.
Yeah, thank you, Sachini. Exactly, there's in the sutta called Dona Sutta, Buddha exactly pointed out the same thing. He said that just like a lotus flower can be rooted in the mud and can be fed by the muddy water, but it can rise above that. So this transcendence, that's what it symbolizes: transcendence, and also the purity, because the lotus is also quite pure, even though it is rooted there. So the enlightenment symbolizes this possibility of transcending our limitations of our mind, transcending the habitual patterns in our mind. So it's that message of transcendence and also a message of purity is the main thing in lotus. Okay, let's go to the other part of the lesson. Okay, let me share my screen again with you. Okay, I will encourage you to mute your microphone right now. So we can, until I open my next discussion time, I think you can go ahead and mute your microphone, so that will be helpful for our class. Okay, let's start with the first item of the Noble Eightfold Path. So all these 8 items in the Eightfold Path are working together, helping together. That's why it is presented in an image of a wheel, because it contributes to each other. But the first item, what you call Samma Ditti, is a forerunner of all these items. And so it's more like having the correct view, or maybe the correct vision, I would say, a correct orientation that kind of makes all other items, all other behavior, all other speech, all other practices, all other efforts wholesome. And here I want to spend a little bit more time on this translation of right. So the actual Pali term is called Samma Ditti. And of course, Ditti here there means view or vision, mainly view. But Samma does not translate directly as right. But I had to use that translation because that is what you will see in the most literature, Buddhist literature you will encounter. So I don't want you to be confused, introducing a different term. So because it has been already translated, more than 100 years now as right view. But the term Samma does not necessarily translate to right. So as we call the Buddha Samma Sambuddho. So there also we find the term Samma. The term Samma has more of the meaning of more like a holistic, maybe perfect. So Samma Sambuddha is translated as perfectly enlightened. So the more closer translation would be like Sammaditthi is more like a perfect view, or maybe appropriate view, appropriate view for the eradication of suffering. So there's no like right and wrong kind of strong that kind of strong value judgment here. But here is meaning that if you really want to do something about dukkha, something about suffering, and this is the appropriate vision you can have for that. So, or maybe like perfect vision. So I just want to emphasize that. And the first item is actually when we start this practice, this is a practice that we should start with a vision in our mind, with a certain orientation in our mind. And this starts with the basic view. So right view is more like having a basic understanding of the map of the reality, and also the map for the spiritual journey that we'll be taking on. So the Noble Eightfold Path, or this middle path, the spiritual journey, is something that you will start after having a quite clear view about what you are going to do and what you are going to achieve. And it's not a blind journey that along the way you will and find things, but this is like a journey that you start having a right view. So this is more like simile is given is like consulting a roadmap. Like you are going to make a journey, and then you consult a map. Okay, this is the route I had to go. These are the challenges I will meet, and this is the turns I had to make. Or maybe you talk to someone who has gone there before. So you learn from that person that what are the things that person did. So you have kind of general idea where are you going, and also what you need to do. So that's having that vision, and it's more like an orientation is what we call the right view. It's like having a destination, like having a direction to our life. So the right view actually creates a direction to our life. And this journey is not something that you will move to one direction and then you think that that's not going to work, I'm going to change the other direction. So you have to have a direction. It's like a polar star. So you have a direction to go. So having that direction is what we call the right view. And we need to remember that our vision can influence how we pursue the world, how we our values, and also our behavior. And that this basic orientation, this view, general map of the reality and the map of the journey, it's not insignificant. It's going to influence, all our decisions, our choices. And of course, there's a correct quote from the Buddha in numerical discourses called, "There is no single factor so responsible for the suffering of living beings as the wrong view, and no factor so potent in promoting the good of living beings as the right view." Again, we have to remember the right view and the wrong view is the general translation, but it can be like inappropriate view and appropriate view, or maybe imperfect view and perfect view. So this is, just need to remember that is so important. It's kind of it. The right view is the perfect vision, maybe the appropriate vision. Our vision can influence all other behavior, all other choices we make, all our values. Our values are based on our view, our vision. So it's really important to make it correct or make it perfect. And there are two levels in the right view. So I'm going to use the term right view, but now it has a more like a meaning of a perfect vision. But let's use the common translated term with understanding that it has more deeper meaning. So there are two levels of this map. that we need to first understand in as the first item of this whole practice. Have the vision, have the orientation. So one element of this basic orientation is to have a correct grasp of the moral efficacy of action. On these two levels, mundane level, more rudimentary, preliminary level, we need to have that understanding that our actions, not all actions, let's say volitional actions, our volitional behaviors are with potent, are with potentials, or maybe potency to give rise to similar results. Is of course, you will hear the in your mind you may be thinking about the karma or karma. Yes, definitely this is about the karma, but sometimes the term karma has so many other meanings. So one basic understanding is that our actions do matter. Our actions do matter to ourselves, and also to others. Our actions all are creating certain habits in us, and our actions create certain potency in us that has the ability to give different experience to us. So and then the one important sermons of the Buddha, when Buddha described the right view, he said that when a noble disciple understands what is karmically unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, and what is karmically wholesome and the root of wholesome, and then he has the right view. So this understanding this basic distinction. There are wholesome actions, there are unwholesome actions, there are roots for this wholesome and unwholesome action. How we decide an action is wholesome and unwholesome is very important, and understanding that there are morally wholesome actions, there are morally unwholesome actions, and those actions has an influence on us and also to everyone else. So let's go to understand the roots of action. How we decide an action is wholesome and unwholesome. And then, of course, wholesome actions has wholesome results and unwholesome actions has unwholesome results. How we decide an action is wholesome or unwholesome is based on volition in the Buddhist discourses. Volition. We need to understand here volition is an underlying mental state when we are engaging in an action. So our action outwardly can appear in different ways, but what's really underlying mental state is important here. So we call the greed, aversion, and delusion, or we call in Pali lobha, dosa, and moha, and these are called unwholesome roots. So if any of our actions are rooted in one of these roots, either in a greed or a sense of an aversion or delusion, and they are called unwholesome action, and those actions have unwholesome results. And of course, we also have similarly opposite roots also. We are not only capable of greed, but we are also capable of letting go. We are also capable of being generous. Sometimes we can be so greedy on one aspect and we can be so generous on the other aspect. So we have this two possibility. So the other three roots are called generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. If any of our actions are based on these roots, we call them wholesome, and they have wholesome results. So general understanding, the one important aspect of this right orientation is to understand that there's a distinction between wholesome action and unwholesome actions. And that distinction is not simply personal opinions. It's not simple that my own opinion that I think that these things are good, these things are bad. It's also not based on social conventions. Because in certain societies, certain things can be good, certain things can be bad. But those exist separately. What we understand in this right view is that there's an objective universal principles for the wholesome actions and unwholesome actions, and that principle is the volitions that produce them, the underlying mental state, not necessarily the intention of what we want to do. Actually, the underlying mental state while you are doing the action. Underlying mental state while you are doing the action, that really matters. Not really your intention, what you are aiming for. That has some influence, but what really you have in your mind, what kind of mental state that are dominant in your mind while you are doing the action, That's going to decide whether it's a wholesome action and unwholesome action based on these 6 roots. And so basic understanding that there are wholesome and unwholesome actions and they have psychological roots. That is the element of the first, the mundane right view. Okay, before we move to that, anyone has any questions about that? Mundane right view. I think many of us, at the very basic level, we need to like come to that understanding that whatever we do in our life has an influence on our mind. Our actions influence our consciousness. Our actions produce certain habits and patterns and certain impressions in our consciousness. So understanding that, and every living beings, when they engage in any kind of activities, and based on the volitions that influence those actions, will imprint it will imprint certain tendencies in our mind, and those things can yield us different results in different points in our life. So we have to be responsible for action. That is the very basic right view, right orientation in the life. So that's like becoming more morally responsible, like becoming real serious about what we do. Okay.
Swamin Mohan sir,
Yes.
could you kindly please explain the difference again between the intention and the volition?
Okay, thank you for that question. I also got another question, similar question. I would like to know more about what is meant by the volition, and when we say understanding, do you mean based on a study or history or experience? If not intention, then where does this knowledge comes from? What inform volition? What is the difference between volition and intention? Yeah, the same question. Thank you. Yes, intention is the what we aim, right? What we aim from an action. Let's say um, the intention is like a long. It has a long term. So I can have intention to help someone. So that is intention. That is important. But let's say I went to help the person, and now I'm helping that person. I'm doing whatever action that I think that being going to help that person. So when I'm doing that help, and I'm also in a particular state of mind, right? And that is what really matters. Okay, our intention informs our volition. So if you have a good intention, and that will definitely inform our volition. But what really matters is the underlying mental state while we are doing it. And that's the difference. The volition is always concurrent with the action. And intention can be prior to the action. I mean, because sometimes, when sometimes people have a good, so-called good intention, even when they do bad things, for example. Let's say you can harm one person, thinking that, that will help so many other people. So someone can argue that, well, I have a good intention. I want to save the community. Now I want to save, that person. So therefore I harm this person. Because we have intention to help someone at the expense of others doesn't mean that that action is going to be wholesome. Of course, we can have intention to help anyone. That's important. But what really matters is the underlying mental state while you are doing it. So basic difference between intention and volition is that intention can be prior to the action. It's important. I'm not going to say that it's not important. It's important. It's make sure that your intentions are also good. But what's really important, and what's really we have to be careful and mindful of the mental state that we are in while we are doing the action. And that's going to decide the quality, the moral quality of the action, karma. Okay, I think so. We can again move to our lesson now. Let me share the screen again with you. Okay, let's move to the other level of right view. So this is what you call the superior level of right view or supramundan level of right view. The first level is understanding the moral efficacy of our actions, moral efficacy of actions. The second level is actually having a conceptual understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So we knew that, the Noble Eightfold Path is the last item of the Four Truths, but that the first item of the Four Noble Truths is actually again having a correct grasp of the whole Four Noble Truths. In the supramundane level, this involves understanding, at least in a conceptual level, that how suffering or how dukkha arises in our mind, how it can be overcome. Mainly understanding the mechanism of suffering, at least theoretically at this level, because one thing I want you to think about generally how we understand the mechanism of suffering. And this is usually how we understand the mechanism of suffering. And we think that either the dukkha is caused by others or external force. And this is very common way that we understand suffering, thinking that, this whatever I'm going through, whatever suffering is caused by someone else, or maybe some external force. So of course that can be one aspect of it, but we try to put the blame on someone else. That's one way of understanding suffering. Some other people caused us our suffering completely, or placing the responsibility of in other external force that's beyond our control. The second way of understanding suffering is that self-blame, thinking that dukkha is solely caused by oneself. There's an important truth in here also, because we will understand later that there's an important contribution that we make to our own suffering. But thinking that is solely caused by ourselves is also one wrong understanding according to the Buddha. In two sense, one is that the dukkha is a causally produced phenomenon, and we will understand that later. But there's a role that as an individual plays in this whole mechanism, but it's not completely caused by by oneself. And also, when you think about that, it's solely caused by oneself. There's also a subtle element of I here, or subtle element of acceptance of a permanent I who can cause suffering. So in the deeper Buddhist understanding, actually, in the higher level, we understand that what we call I is also a process. So there's no permanent agent behind this experience. And so to say that dukkha is caused by oneself is also implicitly accepting that there's a permanent I. So therefore, it's also considered as a wrong understanding. And third one will be like thinking that suffering just happens, happens accidentally or by chance. There's no order, nothing we can do about it. So these are called, wrong understanding. But the correct understanding will be suffering arises due to the meetings of causes and conditions. So understanding the suffering as a phenomenon that arises due to causes and conditions, as a causally produced conditions, and that is why we can gradually overcome from it. If the suffering is caused completely by others, and so it's really difficult for us to overcome it. And if it happens just accidentally, there's no order, we cannot find the real pattern, and there's also no solution to that. But understanding the suffering as a causally produced experience, there are causes and conditions. Of course, there are elements that we put in, and there are also the other condition causes that is beyond us. So it's a combination of all these things, and then it comes as a causally or conditionally produced phenomenon. And having that the causal like causally produced or maybe conditionally produced nature is very important when we come to understand the suffering. So when it comes to now, if you have that understanding that the mechanism of suffering, mechanism of dukkha, and I would like you to like pay some attention, thinking about what you think as the causes and conditions. So here I use the term causes and conditions. So causes can be like primary causes and conditions can be supporting factors. So we have primary factors and supporting factors. So I would like to pay some little bit attention, referring to your own experience of suffering, what you think as the uh, causes and conditions that produce suffering. Can anybody give your thoughts? What you think as causes and conditions that?
Hi, Bante. This is Chris.
Hi, Chris. Yes, Chris. Go ahead.
Um, I know for me personally, a lot of my suffering or lack of constant happiness is caused by me wanting things to go a certain way and they do not go that way.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. So you point out an important element, an important fact of this whole mechanism. That is, you're wanting things to be otherwise, right? Yes. So yeah, that's a very important factor. Okay. Anybody else has other factors that you think contributing the experience of dukkha? Okay, Chris, you just say that, you're wanting things to happen in other way. Why do you think that things doesn't happen the way you want?
Why do I think things don't happen the way I want?
No, I mean, of course, we know that, things do not happen the way we want. Yeah. Why things are not happening the way we want?
I think some of it's that, as human beings, we want to have control
Yes.
over our lives, and we think we have a lot more control over our lives and what happens than we actually do.
Yeah.
And
So,
and not like truly understanding that that's not the case leads to a lot of suffering, I think.
yes. So we need to control things, but I think what I'm sensing from you that we need to control, we need to contain everything, we need to control things. So that's our need. So that's one factor. But we also see that these things, what we call the things or experience of those things, does not stay the same, right? And this moves also. So what I want you to think about, of course, we have the inner aspect of it, and then and the world has its own functions. For example, our body has its own function, and this body is an organism. So in this body as an organism has certain way that it will grow, it will move, and eventually get old. So that's the nature of this organism. And also there's also nature of any other phenomena, any other phenomena in the world. What I mean by the impermanence is also can be one factor, but it's not really within our control. And so things are changing all the time. And of course, it's not necessarily the impermanence that creates suffering. Our expectation is to be otherwise can create suffering. But that's the element that we put into this whole thing. So I mean, we need to understand that there are so many conditions that are at work producing this whole experience of dukkha, but we can only change the conditions that we put in. So that's what we have to be. We can change. So there are so many other conditions that are contributing to the suffering in the inherent nature of impermanence, or maybe like in certain bad habits of other people, or maybe some unfair systems, unfair social structures. Those things, are part of this whole experience of suffering. And among all these things, there's also an element, there's also part that we contribute. I think that Chris was explaining those things that we contribute. So among all these mechanisms, all these factors, the one factor that we have some control, we have some control or some kind of power are the psychological factors that we put in. So although the suffering has so many causes and conditions, but if we change what we put into this, and that one factor that we change can change the whole phenomenon. And that's what we do when it comes to change the suffering. Okay, let me see. I have some question here. Craving a need for control, ignorance and craving for divine wisdom. Okay. Ignorance and craving, there you comes. That's the two important part of this. Let me go back to the lesson now. Yes, I think now we have a sense that dukkha or suffering, the mechanism of suffering, mainly there's an element of a psychological element that what we put into that, and then that's also the only part that we have some control of. Let me see. I'm trying to get to the screen again. Okay, I got it again. Okay, yes. I think the part that we contribute to the experience of suffering is called craving, or literally translated as thirst. As Chris said, that wanting the otherwise, but in Buddhist description, we have these three aspects to our craving. So the suffering, there are causes and conditions for this experience of suffering to arise. And it could be due to the nature of our biological organisms and nature of the existence of the world, which is primarily characterized by impermanence and change. And change is the inherent part of the existence. And then, of course, certain things can change, and so certain changes can be favorable to us and unfavorable to us. But then the important part is that psychological element we put into this, and that's play a very important role, and that's what we call craving. So craving for sensual gratification, and that's one aspect to it. Always looking for some kind of sensual gratification, some kind of pleasure seeking, craving, and try to always plugged in, so to speak. And that constant seeking for sensual gratification itself is not really giving us any kind of satisfaction or peace. Once we finish with one gratification, we will need more gratification, and we will move to the other gratification. So simply we constantly seeking for gratification without really finding any sense of peace. And in that whole effort to gratify our senses, we will also engage in so many immoral actions also, and that can create so many other suffering to ourselves and others too. And then the second form of craving is also called craving for cherishing self, like maintaining the self-identity. This is quite deep actually, like the craving to maintain self-identity, and this is also one big element for creating suffering in us. Like we shouldn't blame anyone for having this, but just to understand that these factors create unsatisfaction or unhappiness in people's mind, and if we are wise enough, we should do something about it. Like like reason that we are offended by certain comments and people put in our Facebook page, or maybe when we get really when we really suffer when people blame us, call us names. And of course, those things are bad, definitely. But the reason that we suffer is that this craving, and and also based on the level of craving, the level of suffering will be there. And of course, there's also another more converted twist of this. I mean, there's a twist for this craving. Also, there's, people may not believe that there's also craving for harming self, like a craving for self-destruction. And this is also a very subtle form of craving that we all have. It's more like more like a self-hatred. Like you like certain image of yourself, and then if you cannot have that, you like to destroy it. And if you don't, it doesn't. So it's more like a self-hatred, but actually there's hatred also coming from a craving. So there are like multiple manifestations of this craving. That's the main psychological part of this experience of suffering. And having this understanding is what we call the right view. And of course, the craving arises based on a basic misunderstanding, and that's what we're going to correct. In the right view, we try to correct it and try to understand the impermanence as the inherent part of the nature. And reason that we have craving is that we don't see the reality as it is. We don't see the reality as a flow. We don't see reality as a process. We don't see ourselves as a process. And the moment we take everything in a solid nature, and we need to either grab into it or we try to avoid, push them away. So based on that basic ignorance, we have cravings, and craving is a psychological part, psychological elements that we put into that whole experience of suffering. So those in the supramundane level of right understanding or the right view, we have to have a basic grasp of the Four Noble Truths, or basic grasp of the mechanism of dukkha. Let's put in that way: basic grasp of the mechanism of dukkha. So what dukkha is, and then how dukkha arises. We know there's a causal product, but then there's a psychological element to that. That is the craving, and basically craving based on ignorance. And then we also have to have a basic understanding that it is possible, because the whole phenomenon of suffering arises has also a psychological roots. The factors that we put in, mainly our craving, mainly our expectations, mainly the way we mentally relate. And if we change that, we will be able to overcome that. So the next possibility is that the state of perfect peace or perfect happiness comes when that craving and ignorance are completely eliminated. And it is possible that we can make such a psychological transformation. It is mainly a transformation. And that perfect peace can be achieved by following the gradual training, what you call the Noble Eightfold Path. So actually having a deep understanding of the Eightfold Path itself, and also the Four Noble Truths that provide the context for this Noble Eightfold Path, having at least a basic grasp of that is what we call the right view, or maybe the perfect vision. So the two levels is like mundane level, understand the moral efficacy of our actions, and the deeper level, understand the mechanism of suffering. Understand the mechanism of suffering. Is anyone having any problem about understanding the mechanism of suffering? Suffering as a causally produced phenomenon. It's not completely other created. It's not a completely oneself created, but it is a causally produced thing. And there are elements that we contribute. When we change what we contribute, we can change the whole experience. Is it clear? That's the basic understanding we need in order to do some practice, in order to start our Noble Eightfold Path. Once we have that grasp of dukkha, and then we can do something about it. So I'm getting a question here. In American culture, being aggressive is seen as a good personality trait in law, business, and measure of success. It seems to be understood that in order to be a winner, it is necessary to squash others, and so they are losers. Sometimes I feel that trying to find a state of equanimity makes me seem weak and negatively impact outcomes. How do we engage realistically in these systems while also maintaining the right view? Okay, being aggressive as a virtue, right? That will be, the one way, particularly in the corporate world, people may think that being aggressive is a way of, a key to success. But I think there's the big cost. Our whole goal is to actually to find a more complete peace, more complete happiness in our life. So we can be aggressive, and maybe you can, be successful in a way, in terms of, the profits you make, in terms of, the fame and wealth you may achieve, but you are doing it at the cost of your personal happiness, cost of happiness in your family. And I think, there's an important aspect here, because people think that being aggressive and also being angry as a strength. Even children think that being, like getting angry is a kind of, sign of strength. But I would say actually, to be aggressive, to be angry is very easy. Do you think that it is difficult to get angry? Right. It's very easy to get angry. It's very easy to, be aggressive. We don't need to get any training for that, right? And so what do you think as if it is so easy, and can we think it as a virtue? Any skill, any virtue is something that we need to acquire, right? And it's very hard to stay alert. It's very hard to be attentive. It is very hard to be patient, right? It is very hard. So so if it is very hard to be patient, it's very hard to be mindful, and if you develop that ability, isn't it a virtue, a skill? Right? We develop that ability. So we don't need to train ourselves to be angry and be aggressive. So anybody can do that, right? So can it be a virtue in that case? So I think, we need to, so I can see that is how people will think that. I would say that, that those things are easily done. People can be aggressive, people can be selfish, people can be angry very easily. And those are already kind of, traits of an ordinary personality. But I think what can be skills and virtues are the ones that we train ourselves, we grow ourselves. And those would be not anger, not aggressiveness, but more patience and loving kindness. But and also, if you, in the long run, actually, even in business and even in our relationships, I think in the long run, our patience and our ability to, have more forgiveness can help us to have more success in the long run. You may think that being aggressive can bring you success, maybe temporary success, but if you're thinking about long run success, I think it's not the anger or aggressiveness that's going to help you. Okay, I think we can move to the last part of the lesson. So we talk about the right view right now. Then just to summarize for you, right view is, like I say, right view is a basic orientation that we will have into our life, and it has two aspects to it. First one is a mundane level of understanding, and that is understanding that our actions, our volitional, willful actions has repercussions, has results, there's a moral efficacy to our actions. And then also the second aspect is to have some understanding of the mechanism of dukkha, how dukkha arises, and understanding what we contribute to that experience. and then having that understanding, and having also that understanding how our expectations, our craving, and our tendencies contribute to this whole experience of suffering is helpful. It's not really self-blaming, it's not other blaming, but understanding it as a causally produced phenomenon, and then understanding the parts that we contribute, and changing only the parts that we contribute can change the whole experience. And that is what we call the supramundane right view. So there are two factors that can help us to develop or maybe sharpen our right view. Remember that right view start with one level, and then we'll slowly move and move. And the more we start to practice the other elements of the Noble Eightfold Path, and more we get more clarification, more sharpening of the right view also. So there's a loop, feeding feeding each other. We will come to that in our other lessons. But there are two factors that can sharpen our right view. The first factor is called listening or reading the teachings of the Buddha, because Buddha has talked so much about clarifying our view, and so much about the mechanism of suffering. The more we read, more we listen on the teachings of the Buddha, how the Buddha has explained the mechanism of suffering, the more we read that, and also has explained the moral efficacy of actions. The more we read that, we can sharpen our right view. But the reading and listening is not enough, and also you have to have wise reflections on what you learned, and also wise reflection of your own experiences. We know we are going through an experience. Let's say moments of suffering. That's a good moment to reflect. Remember, that is the mud that can help you as a fertilizer to grow as a lotus. So any moments of suffering, any moments of pain and discomfort can be a good opportunity, good ingredients for us to reflect on, using the understanding that we had. And then we will know the full mechanism, and we will know what are the elements that I have put into this whole experience. And then you can, if you change, maybe our interpretation of the incidents, maybe our patterns of behavior, and maybe our expectations from that person or situation, whatever. So when you see that psychological part of it, and you make some changes to that psychological part, that can change the whole experience of suffering. Okay, so keep reading, keep listening, and of course, attending this class could be one factor. And then, of course, keep reflecting on what you have learned, and also keep reflecting on experience. That way we can sharpen our right view, and we can discuss the other elements of the path in our other weeks. Okay, so I would like to share this cartoon with you. This is a cartoon which said that end is insight. There's interesting, twist. Interesting meaning of this term. End is insight means that the end is within our sight. And end of suffering is within our sight, within our possibility. It can be reached. So the end of suffering is within our sight, within our possibility. But at the same time, it's also called end is insight. Insight means deeper wisdom, and we start with right view, and then we sharpen it until it become our experience and knowledge. We'll talk about it later. First, we have to have right view, and then we sharpen it through our practice, and it ultimately will become our own experience. And that's called insight. So the end of suffering is also insight. And end of suffering is insight when you have a right view, and then it will develop into insight later. Okay, so we have 3 more minutes left for our class. I would like you to give last chance if you have any more questions today. Okay, would like to type any of last questions? Or if you'd like to ask any of your last questions. Okay. Now, I'd like to give you a chance, because we have so many people, we don't have chance to talk each other, but I really look forward to see you all next week also. But I can give a chance to a few people to introduce oneself, particularly people who haven't been to the Buddhist center. I'd like to give more chance to them. If you haven't visited our Buddhist center before, and if you are joining this class for the first time, and I would like to hear about you, I can give opportunities for 3 people, and let's briefly introduce. What's your name? Where are you from? How you come to know about this class? Okay, can we can we have that? Can we have 3 volunteers, 3 persons to introduce themselves? Yes, 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 Susie. Yes, can you talk? I can't hear you.
Susie.
I can't.
Oh, you can't hear me.
I now can hear you. Yes, yes. Go ahead.
I'm Susie. I'm from Malaysia.
Yes.
I got to know about
welcome
this
to USA. It should be late night for you.
Yes, it is. It's 10:30 at night in Malaysia.
Okay.
I got to know about this class through Bante. Thank you for the invite.
Welcome.
And I like to go to Pittsburgh one day.
Yeah,
after the lockdown.
Welcome. You are most welcome to visit our center and our beautiful, our friendly community here. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. 2 more people have chances. Please introduce yourself briefly. Anyone else? Like to say your name? Where are you from? Yes. Okay, I see. Okay, Timothy, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, hi, Banti. I'm sitting over here in New Jersey. I was told by my Uncle Ron, who is also in the class. Just very, very happy to be here and very happy for the lesson.
Oh, so glad to have a person from New Jersey. I hope that you are fine there, right? You are taking care of yourself well?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Timothy. Anyone else? One more chance. Yes, Barrett?
Hi.
Yes, yeah. Can you go ahead? How you pronounce your name?
Barrett.
Okay.
Go
ahead. Tell me about you. You come to our class.
We retired here recently. I have studied with Ty at Magnolia Village in Batesville, Mississippi, a beautiful retreat, monastery and retreat. And I heard about the course from my daughter who lives in Pittsburgh.
Your daughter is from Pittsburgh, okay.
Yes.
You are originally from? You are from where?
From Boston.
Boston, okay. You're from Boston, okay.
Retired here on the Gulf in Alabama about 8 months ago. My daughter has visited the monastery there, and she of course she knows that both my wife and I are Buddhists and that we practice every day. But when she saw the course, she wanted to enroll herself and sent me an invitation. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much, brother. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Barrett, and I hope to see you in other weeks too. Okay. So let's conclude the class. I'm so glad again that so many of you joined the class. I hope that I will send the readings for the other class in email. So spend your time to digest and have your questions ready. And now you know this chat section, and you can even type those questions in advance also. So we can do that. And really, thank you very much. At the conclusion, I just want to give you a short blessing chant and wishing every one of you a very healthy stay. And we all need strong immunity. We all need a positive mindset. And I'm so glad that you're using this period for your own spiritual growth. I will do this wholesome chant and then wish every one of you, or every one of you who joined this class and all your family members, be blessed with good health, and may you have strong immunity, and may you have peace and happiness, and may you be able to help many others, even though we are physically limited, and may you get more opportunities to at least to talk and help and inspire so many other people to grow spiritually. May you all be well, happy, and peaceful. Sabbhityo vivajjantu sabbarogo vinasatu Mate bhavatantantarayo sukhi diga yuko bhava.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, see you all next Saturday.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Yes, you can leave now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bhante.
Oh, thank you, Ritesh. Thank you.